Well, I'm really excited about this section where we're going to talk about the LegalShield product. This product is one that personally I love. I think it's a phenomenal product. It's really the only thing that we had to sell when I started, and so it was something that I very quickly became very passionate about. I remember my first group presentation, and it was in a room. There were 12 people around a board table. It was not a good presentation. I had practiced. I thought that I was ready to go out and do my first presentation. When I got up in front of this room of 23 people, I was only 22 years old, of course, and didn't have much experience speaking in front of groups. But I got in front of the group, and all of a sudden, everything that I had practiced and everything that I had learned just kind of went out the window. And I talked about the legal plan. But honestly, it was probably one of the worst presentations that has ever been done about the LegalShield plan. It was amazing, though. At the end, I didn't even want to close. I wanted to run back and get in my car and just hide. But my brother had taught me to close. He said, have them start filling out the application. And so I did. I told him, take out your pen and start filling out the application. And I was amazed. People started filling out the application. They actually started writing on their form. And at first I thought, there's no way that they're filling out their form, that they're signing up based on the presentation that I just did, because it like I said, it was historically bad. But sure enough, out of those 12 people that were in the room that day, 5 of them ended up signing up. And I learned a couple of things from that. Number one, I learned that your presentation doesn't have to be perfect of this plan. This plan has so much value that people can see that value. But another important thing that I learned is that while I may have messed up on a lot of the details and maybe didn't present the coverage in the best way, I think that those people in that room could feel some of the belief that I had in this membership. And here's why. I had the membership myself, and I had used the LegalShield membership. And I think if I did anything right, that was it, that I had used the plan myself. And so I knew within myself that it worked. I knew that when you called and told them about a legal situation, that an attorney would call you back. I knew how the attorney had treated me each time that I had called. I knew, more importantly, how that made me feel, that sense of empowerment when all of a sudden, something that I had never had before, access to the legal system. Most 22-year-old college students don't have access to the legal system. I knew how it felt to all of a sudden have that. And if anything was positive in that first group presentation that I did, I think that was it. I think that was somewhat palpable, my belief in the membership that we offer. And they say that sales is just a transfer of that belief. And that's something that all of our agents really have to develop themselves. Now, I want to start this section by really talking about the company itself, LegalShield, and share some facts with you about LegalShield. They are really the pioneer of any company that offers legal service plans in North America. They were the first to do that in North America. Of course, they were founded in 1972 by Mr. Harlan Stonecipher. The story of how the company was founded is actually a really interesting one. Back in 1969, Mr. Stonecipher was in a serious automobile accident. The accident was not his fault. In fact, the other party, the lady that hit him, got the ticket for that accident, but she turned around a while later and sued Mr. Stonecipher. And it was interesting to hear him recount this, which he did many times throughout his life. He learned very quickly that you don't have to do anything wrong to find yourself smack dab in the middle of a legal situation. And that's where he found himself back in 1969. Initially, I think he was probably just looking for extra coverage. He said he thought that he was very well covered. He had auto insurance to cover the damage to his vehicle. He had health insurance to cover any medical bills that resulted from that accident. He even had life insurance. Had he not made it, his family would have been taken care of. But the one thing that he was not prepared for were those legal bills. And he thought there should be something that someone could buy to help prepare them for that type of situation. In the event that they needed to hire an attorney, which can be a very expensive process, he thought that something should be there that someone could have to protect them in that situation. And nothing existed at that time. And that's where he started the company, from that idea and from that experience. And that's kind of the foundation of LegalShield. Today, LegalShield is by far the premier provider of legal plans in North America. They maintain a proprietary network of law firms, and that's really what makes them unique. They pay these law firms in excess of $100 million a year, and they're the only legal plan provider that utilizes that type of provider law firm system. That system is very unique in that these firms that they contract with are essentially prepaid. They're paid in advance every month before their phone ever rings. And what that does is it ensures that the highest quality of service is delivered to LegalShield clients. When they pay these firms, and some of them, they're paying them 7 figures a month. So, you think about that. That makes them their number one client. These firms are under contract with LegalShield. They have a service agreement that they agree to deliver service in certain ways. So, for example, when you call that provider law firm, LegalShield requires that they call you back within 8 business hours. And I think you'll find that most of the time it doesn't take anywhere close to that 8 business hours, but it won't go over 8 business hours because LegalShield is online with these provider law firms and they're monitoring those type of things. There's actually 15 areas of quality control that they monitor with these provider law firms. And that's why the service from LegalShield is so exceptional, is because there's that level of quality control that just, it would never exist without that unique provider law firm model. Let's talk about the need for legal services in North America. I think that that's fairly self-evident. Most people understand that the need for legal services has never been greater. But take a look at these. These are some common myths about the legal system. In other words, this is the way that you'll find some people think about the legal system. One is that some people think that they can just kind of figure out the legal system all on their own. So they don't need advice from an attorney if they end up in a situation. They could just Google the answer. And I'll tell you what happens when someone goes on Google and they're looking for legal advice. They might scroll through page 1 of Google and not find the answer that they're looking for. Maybe what they see on page 1 really they don't like that answer, that doesn't appeal to them. So they go to page 2 or page 3, and finally they find a page that tends to agree with their point of view. And what happens there is they end up finding the answer that they like and not the answer that's right. Well, that's not a very good strategy when you're dealing with the legal system. Here's another myth or a way that people sometimes erroneously think about the legal system, that the only people who use attorneys are those who get in trouble. You'll hear that. I don't really need an attorney. I don't really get in trouble. Or this third one, I'm an honest person. I don't really have a lot of legal situations. The reality, folks, is that every American is going to have legal situations. In fact, look at this quote here from the National Resource Center for Consumers of Legal Services. They say that even law-abiding Americans will encounter a potential legal situation an average of 4 to 6 times per year. Now let's break that down. What are they really saying there? And they're not saying that average Americans are going to be sued 4 to 6 times per year, or going to go through a divorce or a bankruptcy 4 to 6 times per year. Those are the things that sometimes people think, oh, that's where you'd hire an attorney. No, we're talking about everyday stuff that happens to people. They might be overcharged for a repair. They might have a dispute on their utility bill or a cell phone bill. Not that that's ever happened, a cell phone company overcharging one of its customers on a bill, right? What if they have a creditor that's harassing them? Or what if they have an issue with a landlord or a tenant? What if they have a question about getting a will done? I mean, there are so many things that people deal with, and they don't necessarily think of them as legal situations. And here's why. Because most people would not go out and hire an attorney when they're dealing with that type of situation. But I think that we could all agree, if they had an attorney, and if an attorney was helping them, they'd probably be in better shape. They'd probably have better advice. They'd probably make better decisions. And yet they don't hire a lawyer. So think about that. Why when people are dealing with these types of life situations where an attorney really could help them, why don't they go out and hire an attorney? And here's the answer. The average cost of an attorney in the United States of America is $284 an hour. The reality is, it's not that people could not benefit from a lawyer, it's just simply that they feel they can't afford a lawyer. And in most cases, they can't. At least they can't afford to go hire an attorney on a regular basis, not at $284 an hour. And that's why one of the things that Mr. Stonecipher used to say that really resonated with me, he said, in America, it's not that you're innocent until proven guilty, it's really that you're innocent until you're proven broke. The reality is the color of justice in America is green. Most people do not have access to the legal system. The legal system in America is a great system. I would argue it's the best in the world. The problem is not the legal system. The problem is that most people, cannot access that system. And that's what LegalShield changes. LegalShield gives everyday Americans access to the legal system. And that's something that you and I should be really passionate about. We're giving people something that they've never had before, that kind of access. I know in my case, I had never had that before. Now let's talk about the coverage of LegalShield itself. And let me just say right up front, not every legal situation is going to be covered. When you're talking about, about $1 a day for coverage, obviously not every conceivable legal situation is going to be covered 100%. So let's talk about what is covered 100%. And I think that you'll find that LegalShield, with the coverage, there really is a nice mixture of some of the major legal life events that could happen, but also a nice mixture of those everyday issues that people deal with, those everyday issues that arise where an attorney really could help. LegalShield is going to be able to cover many of those things 100%. I'll just make a note here that coverage does vary in different states, so obviously you'll want to check your state to see what coverage is applicable in your state. But let's get into coverage and what does a LegalShield plan provide. The first and most commonly used feature of the LegalShield plan is the unlimited advice. So advice on an unlimited number of personal legal issues. Now, here's what that means. That when I have a question, no matter what that question is regarding, what area of law it's regarding, if it's a question about my taxes, if it's a question about a real estate issue, if it's a question about family law or estate planning or whatever I might be dealing with, I can call and speak to an attorney. And here's what's great about LegalShield. It's always an attorney that's going to call you back. It's never a paralegal. It's never a legal secretary. It's always an attorney. And it's an attorney that specializes in that area that you have a question in. So, for example, if I have a question about real estate, I'm not going to call LegalShield or my provider law firm and have a divorce lawyer call me back. It's going to be an attorney that specializes in real estate. One of the most impressive things about LegalShield and their proprietary network of law firms is that the average tenure of the attorneys that you're going to be speaking to is 19 and a half years. That's the average time that they've practiced law. So these are experienced attorneys. They're attorneys that know what they're talking about. And it's going to be, again, an attorney that calls you back and gives you that advice, a specialist, which I think is so great. I mean, it's just like doctors. If I had a heart problem, I wouldn't want to go to a foot doctor about that. You'll also hear, when you're talking about attorneys that specialize in different areas, you'll hear some people say, well, my brother's a lawyer, or my cousin's an attorney, or my dad is an attorney. Would I really need LegalShield? And the answer is yes, because your brother or cousin or dad, they only specialize in one area of law. But with LegalShield, you've got access to, again, attorneys that specialize in every area of law. Just like if my brother was a foot doctor and I had a heart problem, I would not go to my brother. Now, I might ask his advice, and he might be able to refer me to an attorney, or to a doctor in that case, that specializes in that issue. Same thing if my sister were an attorney, I could call and maybe she could refer me to someone who specializes in that type of law that I have a question in. But with LegalShield, you don't just get a referral, you get answers, you get advice, you get sound legal counsel, because you're talking to someone that knows what they're talking about. Now, just a couple caveats on this. It does have to be your issue. So I can't call, for example, if my neighbor has a legal question, I can't call on behalf of my neighbor. They can't give me legal advice for someone else, because that would be a violation of attorney-client privilege. And they would, at that point, have to rely on my ability to relay that advice to somebody else, which doesn't really work. So it does have to be, my issue that I call about. And this, we're talking about personal legal issues. So if I had a business question, again, we have, LegalShield has riders and business plans that we could look at for something like that. But these are, with this particular plan, with the LegalShield family plan, we're talking about personal issues that would be covered under this advice. But it is unlimited, meaning that I can call them as many times as I want. If I have 4 different legal questions today, I can call them 4 different times. I can talk as long as I want with the attorneys that call me back. I mean, you think about that, most of the time, if you're calling an attorney, they're billing you per minute that you're talking to them. Not with LegalShield. There's never a clock ticking or anything like that. It's literally unlimited advice. The joke we always tell is, even if you're just legally lonely, you just want to call and talk to somebody, you can use it for that. Obviously, that's a joke, but it is unlimited legal advice, or advice on an unlimited number of personal issues. Another important feature that again is one that a lot of our members use is the letters or phone calls that the law firm is going to write or make on your behalf. And here's what that is. If you ever get in a situation where you're not being treated fairly, and we talked about before, what if a cell phone company overcharges you, or you have an argument on a utility bill, or a warranty issue? That's another common one that people will call about, a warranty company not honoring a warranty. What about an insurance claim? You file an insurance claim and it comes back denied, even though it shouldn't come back denied. What if the insurance company denies it or is giving you the runaround? In any case like that, where you're just not being treated fairly, it's amazing the difference that having an attorney on your side can make. If an attorney writes a letter on your behalf, I think most of us would agree, people are going to take that more seriously than if you or I were to write that letter. I remember one of our members one time related a story. It was about an insurance company. He had filed a claim with that insurance company, and they sent him back a letter saying that they were denying that claim. Well, he wrote them another letter, and he showed in the policy where that should be covered, and yet they sent him another letter saying, I'm sorry, but it's denied. So he called LegalShield. He got an attorney involved. The attorney, the law firm, wrote a letter, and it was funny because the member said, it was the same letter pretty much that I wrote. They spelled out in the policy where that should be covered the same way that I had spelled out in the policy where that should be covered. The difference was the letterhead. This was not coming from me, this was coming from a prestigious law firm. And of course, as you can guess, the insurance company called them back, said, we apologize for this, that was just a mistake. Of course this is going to be covered. It just makes a difference when a law firm gets involved. And With the LegalShield plan, you have the ability of having letters written or phone calls made on your behalf. Again, here's that word, unlimited, on an unlimited number of issues. It is one letter or phone call per issue that the plan will provide, but again, unlimited number of issues. It's also at the law firm's discretion whether that letter or phone call should be made. I think that you'll find what I found, most of the time the law firm is more than happy to write a letter if they feel like it can make a difference for you. There are some cases where they may advise against it. I remember in Louisiana, I lived in Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina came through, and that was one of those odd times where the law firm was advising people directly after the hurricane not to have the law firm write a letter on those members' behalf, specifically to insurance companies, because they were saying that insurance companies at that point were looking for people that could get tied up in litigation because that would delay them having to make a payment. So it was a very unique case, and really it's only for those types of unique cases where the law firm would advise against it. They're not very common most of the time. Again, the law firm is happy to write a letter, which they do at no charge. That's covered 100% under that LegalShield membership. Another great feature of the legal plan is the contract review. So let's talk about that for a minute. Contract review, why would you want an attorney to review a contract before you sign it? Think about that for a second. And I've asked that question to a lot of different people. I've heard a lot of different answers, but it usually boils down to you and I want to know what we're signing. And most contracts are not written to protect you or me if we're the ones signing that contract. Whether it's, opening up a new account, whether it's buying a vehicle or, whatever the situation might be, if a company is handing you a contract, it's typically been written to protect their best interest, not your best interest or my best interest. And so, what's wrong with having, our law firm or my lawyer review a contract before we put our signature on it? Well, that's exactly what LegalShield provides. It's a great feature of the plan. Anything, in most states, they'll cover any contract up to 15 pages that you and I are going to sign. It doesn't have to be a contract, by the way. It could just be a document that you want them to review. I remember one time I had a question about my homeowners association, and they were able to review some pages of our homeowners association document. And so, whatever that might be, but up to 15 pages is typically covered 100% under the plan. And so that's a great feature. It's something that, again, a lot of members use. A lot of times that might be used in conjunction with something else. For example, they may review a document while they're preparing a letter to write on your behalf. Or you call them and ask a question and they'll say, well, why don't you, fax in that contract, let us take a look at it. And again, anything up to 15 pages would be covered 100% under the plan. Another great feature kind of related to that is the mortgage document preparation feature. And what that means is if you are going to buy a home, then they will prepare the mortgage documentation on your behalf. So real simply put, that saves you about $500 or $600 typically at closing, and that's just cash back that you don't have to pay at closing because your law firm is going to prepare that documentation. And that's something that anyone who buys a home, anyone who's going to buy a home, and there are some caveats. They can use it once per year. It does have to be for their primary residence, so wouldn't cover like a rental property or something like that. But if you're, anyone who's going to buy a home, why would they not buy LegalShield? Because that one feature is going to pay for their plan for 2 or 3 years. That one thing. And so think about that. That's just money that people could be saving, and it just goes to show that most people just don't understand that this type of coverage even exists. They certainly don't know about the savings, because there's a lot of people out there that buy homes and they pay that $500 or $600 at closing because they don't know about this particular feature. And in reality, they don't know about LegalShield in general. They don't even know about the concept. It's amazing to me that this company has been in business since 1972, and yet there are so many people that are still not even aware that this type of coverage even exists. It just creates such a perfect opportunity for you and for me. Now, speaking of that, another area that so many people see value in because so many people need is the will preparation. This is one of my favorite parts of the plan. Under the LegalShield coverage, a member can get their last will and testament, the durable power of attorney, and a living will prepared for them, and if they have a spouse or significant other, for that other person as well, for their spouse or significant other as well, at no charge. So this is another area that we're talking about, a full comprehensive will. Another area that you can save so much money by using the LegalShield plan. That same full comprehensive will, those documents that you can have prepared at no charge with your LegalShield plan, if you and I went into an attorney's office and said, hey, this is what we want you to prepare, on average, we're going to spend typically about $700 if you're single, and if you're married, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 to get those documents done. Now, some of you have priced that out, and some of you are probably thinking, the price I was quoted was a lot higher than that. That's true. I'm giving you kind of a low-end number there, but I mean, we're still talking, even if you took $700, that still is such a value because, again, it pays for the LegalShield membership for 3 or 4 years. If that member gets their will done and doesn't use it for anything else, they're ahead for the next 3 or 4 years. There's just, again, such great value. And with the will, one thing that I really like is that value is instant. There's no waiting period for that. They can literally sign up today and get that will done their first week of being a member, and immediately save hundreds or in some cases thousands of dollars by getting that done. So amazing value that's provided there. It's great for a group enrollment or just for enrolling an individual because some people are trying to justify what they're going to spend, and this particular feature makes that justification very easy. All of a sudden, it's not about what they're going to spend for LegalShield, it's how much they're going to save with LegalShield, and it just makes it such a great, an easy decision to make, especially considering that 70% of Americans don't have a will. So, I mean, just think about that. 70% of the people that you're going to talk to, 70% of your friends and family, 70% of employees in a group, 70% of Americans have a need right now for something that you can provide. I mean, that is huge to me. And the last time I checked, 100% of people are going to die. So, I mean, this is something that everyone is going to need. We could spend a lot of time there talking about, why having a will is so important. If your state is a probate state, which most states are probate states, it really boils down to you don't want the state to make decisions on your behalf. And for me, the biggest thing was my kids. I didn't want the state to decide if something happened to my wife and I did not want the state to decide who was going to raise my children. Yeah, and I always joke around. I say, I don't know who the state would pick, but I knew there was a chance they'd choose my in-laws, and I did not want that to happen. But that's a joke, of course. But the reality is nobody wants the state to make really any decisions on their behalf, whether it has to do with their assets or certainly when it comes to raising their children. It's just so crucial to get a will done. Some people say, well, if it's that important, why do 70% of Americans not have a will? And the reason, again, it just goes back to cost. I mean, they'll go price it out at $700, $1,000, $1,500, and a lot of people, they say, man, that's real important, but we'll probably get that done next year, or we'll get that done when our tax return comes, or tax refund comes in, and then that tax refund comes in, and they find something else to spend that money on, and so they just put it off, until unfortunately one day it's too late. And LegalShield gives people the ability to stop putting that important decision off and just get that will done. It's such peace of mind knowing that that's in place to protect your assets and certainly your children and your family. One of my favorite features of the LegalShield plan is the motor vehicle legal services, and the main feature there is assistance with moving traffic violations. I say it's one of my favorites. It's one of the ones that I've used quite a few times. So if you ever get a speeding ticket, they'll provide you a defense. Any moving traffic violation, they'll provide you a defense. I want to be careful here because we need to be clear. LegalShield doesn't fix tickets, okay? So you don't ever want to portray it that way, but they provide a defense. And in most cases, they're really good at getting those tickets reduced so that they don't end up on your record. And you think about, why would you want a ticket, not to go on your record? And I guess every state is different, but in most states, it's gonna give you points, or certainly, regardless of whether your state has a point system or not, you get a ticket on your record, your insurance, your car insurance could go up. And I think most of us could agree, we already spend too much money on our auto insurance. We don't want to spend more money on auto insurance, and this is just a great way to protect ourselves and hopefully keep that from happening. I say, we don't fix tickets because there are some jurisdictions where even if you have an attorney involved, there's just not a whole lot that they can do. Most of the time, and I can tell you in 100% of my cases, every time I've ever gotten a speeding ticket, they've been able to keep that ticket off my record. Obviously, having an attorney there can make a big difference. And the only reason, by the way, that I've ever gotten a speeding ticket is just to make sure that the plan works. I'm just trying it out, to be able to have testimonials. So again, I'm kidding, but I will say this, it is amazing that the difference, again, that having an attorney can make. Not that that's unique to LegalShield, because you could go hire a lawyer. If you got a speeding ticket today, you could go hire an attorney, and that attorney would be happy to represent you. But again, you're going to have to spend money on that, and with LegalShield, that's covered 100%. The other great part about LegalShield is you have access not just to that one law firm, but to LegalShield's network of referral attorneys, which is over 4,200 law firms nationwide. So you can get an attorney, if you get a speeding ticket in a different state, you still call your provider law firm in your state first, but then they would refer you to an attorney in that particular geographic area where you got a ticket. And that is so important, that you're talking with someone local there that could go and represent you. They're familiar with the lay of the land, they're familiar with the best methods. Again, if I'm in my hometown and I get a ticket, I might be real familiar with how things work there, but if I'm traveling out of state, to be able to call and have an attorney in that area where I was traveling go represent me or provide me a defense, whether that means they have to show up in court or whether that means they can call the DA and try to get it reduced, but to provide me that defense, think about not only how much money that could save me, but what kind of empowerment that is to have access to that kind of network. It's exactly what we're providing when we sell someone a LegalShield membership. So it's so powerful. It's just so different than the way that most people live. And I guess that's one way to think about being a LegalShield member, is really a different way of life. Once you get used to it. Again, a lot of people are not used to picking up the phone and calling an attorney when they have a legal question. So it is a little paradigm shift there, but once people get used to that, they love it. It is such incredible peace of mind. Now, there are some other great features in the LegalShield plan, things that are covered still at 100% coverage. When you talk about many of the features that we've already spent some time on, again, I've used that word unlimited number of contracts, unlimited number of letters on your behalf. When you call, you can talk for an unlimited amount of time, unlimited number of moving traffic violations, et cetera, et cetera. These next areas I'm going to show you, there are some limits that are involved here, namely the trial defense feature. Now, what that means is if you ever are sued, if you're ever named as a defendant in a lawsuit, or your spouse or significant other is sued, named as a defendant in a lawsuit, it has to be a civil suit, not a criminal suit, but then it would fall under this trial defense benefit, where our members are going to receive a certain number of hours every year in defense of these kinds of lawsuits. And you can see it starts with 60 hours of coverage their first year. It increases every year that they're a member of LegalShield until that 5th year. It maxes out at 300 hours of coverage, which it's really just great for defending frivolous lawsuits. If someone were to file a lawsuit against you and they knew that you had 300 hours already paid for in your defense, if it's a frivolous suit, there's not much point in them pursuing that. So it's great frivolous lawsuit defense. Now, as you can see, a lot of those hours are in trial hours. The pretrial hours are not very many. With this particular plan, there is a trial defense supplement that would add more pretrial and trial hours that would be good for someone especially if they were in a profession where they had a higher risk of being sued, like a teacher or a law enforcement officer. Then they might be interested in that trial defense supplement, which we'll talk about in another video. But that trial defense feature is a great one. It's not one that is used near as commonly as some of those other features that we've talked about. But it's a great peace of mind feature if someone is sued, and we do live in the most sue-happy society in the world, then they're going to have coverage there with their LegalShield plan. Those hours, and I just want to make a point here, they do increase. It's not like a rollover concept. So, for example, it goes from 60 to 120 year 1 to year 2. It's not if you don't use the 60, then you have 120. It's just whatever you use the first year. If you used all 60 hours the first year, as soon as you're on for that second year and it goes off the anniversary of the membership, then you would automatically go to 120. So it just replenishes every membership year that they have. It is defensive. This is not going to cover offensive litigation. For example, if you want to go sue someone, you could still use your LegalShield membership, but it would just be covered at a 25% discount. That would not be covered under this particular feature. This is just trial defense. Now, another important feature of the plan is the IRS audit legal services. And real simply, if someone is audited by the IRS, they would have up to 50 hours of attorney time that is paid for to help them with that audit. So, having a tax attorney go represent you at an audit or assist you with an audit can obviously be a big help. That coverage begins with the tax return that's filed their first membership year. And so, for example, if someone signs up in December, the tax return that was due way back in April, that return forward is still covered. And so that's another area of the plan that's not real commonly used, but certainly if someone ever did go through a tax audit, that would be a very important thing to have in place, and they would be very grateful that they've got LegalShield. Family law is another great part of the plan, and here they're going to cover things like uncontested divorce, uncontested adoption, and uncontested name change. Now, this is the only part of the plan where there is a waiting period. There is a 90-day waiting period. They have to be a member for at least 90 days, and then they could get those things done, and the legal fees would be covered 100%. So the attorney fees are covered 100% with their LegalShield plan. Well, think about someone who's going through an uncontested divorce, for example. That could save them anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500, sometimes more, depending on where they live. So that's great coverage to have in place. And these are things that obviously some people are going to use. Now, notice that this is going to cover uncontested family law issues that we named. If it's contested, then that would again fall under this final feature of the LegalShield plan, which is the 25% discount. And that's really, we call it the catch-all feature because it catches almost anything that's not covered 100% is going to be covered at a 25% discount under the plan. So some common examples there would include, again, offensive litigation. If someone is going to file a lawsuit against someone else, then they could use LegalShield. LegalShield would provide them a great attorney, but it would be covered at a 25% discount. Contested divorce or those other family law issues, again, uncontested, if they've been on for 90 days, would be covered 100%. If it's contested, it would fall under this 25% discount. Bankruptcy would be another one. DUI would be another one that those would not be covered 100%. But again, if someone was going to deal with something like that, they would have access to sound legal counsel, and that would be available to them. They could call and ask questions under their advice benefit, but any representation and anything else would be covered at that 25% discount. Now, I don't want to sell that short because to me, a 25% discount, that's a great deal. If someone's going to go out and hire a lawyer anyway, why would someone want to pay full price when they can get a 25% discount? I mean, think about, like a contested divorce. If that divorce is going to be $10,000, isn't it better to get 25% off? That would save them $2,500. And by the way, it's a minimum of a 25% discount. In some cases, it is more of a discount that the member is going to receive. But at least 25% off, are you kidding me? That's a phenomenal deal. With these issues that, again, in most cases, they're going to have to hire an attorney anyway. I remember one time I was talking to a lady, she had been a secretary at a law firm. And she said, when I was talking about the membership, but I got into this 25% discount, she said, man, 25% off, that's more than I got. That was more than my employee discount when I was a secretary at the law firm. And I asked her, how much was your employee discount? She said, it was 0%. I paid full price. I paid the same thing that anybody else paid. And so you'll find that with most attorneys, they're not in the habit of giving discounts. You don't drive down the road and see too many billboards where attorneys are saying, hey, 25% off. And so that's, I don't want to sell it short. It's a great deal. They're going to be able to save, in most cases, hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. And they're going to have access to great counsel. And that's the other thing, because they're using LegalShield, they're using attorneys who have been vetted. They don't have to deal with, who do I call? Where do I go? They are going to be able to have that provided for them with their LegalShield membership. So we sometimes talk about that 25% discount as if, that's not a good deal because it's not covered 100%. And the reality is, for those issues where things are going to be covered, issues are going to be covered at a 25% discount, that still is going to save that member a lot of money. Now, in closing, I want to spend some time talking about how LegalShield is not just great coverage, but it's so affordable as well. And as you can see here, we're talking about an entire family being covered for around $1 a day. We like to say for the cost of a bottle of water a day. And we're, again, an entire family. So that's the member, their spouse or significant other, and their children up to the age of 26, as long as they're living at home and have never been married, or if they're a full-time college student, no matter where they live, they're going to be covered. That's huge for a family that has teenage drivers, for example. Think about the money they're going to save with that speeding ticket coverage. So, but entire family covered, again, for about $1 a day. It's just such an exceptional value. I want to share with you one of the techniques that we use. We call it the "if you were my attorney" story. And I've used this a lot myself, where I'll sit down with someone and I'll tell them just to pretend for a minute that they are an attorney. And we're going to say that they're a $300 an hour attorney. And so I'll say, I want to list off, I'm not going to talk about every feature of the plan there, but I'll list off 4 or 5 features. And I'll say, I'm going to give you 4 or 5 things that I want you to provide for me, services that I want you to provide for me. And instead of charging me by the hour, now you're still a $300 an hour attorney, but I want you to come up with a flat monthly fee that I could pay you. and then I'd be able to use these 4 or 5 services as much as I want. And I'll name things like, I want to be able to call you and get unlimited advice. So call you anytime that I have a legal question, 24 hours a day in the case of an emergency, because that's one thing that our members do have access to under that advice is if it's an emergency, if they're in a car wreck or if they have child services showing up to take their children, if they're arrested or detained or served with a warrant, then they can actually access an attorney 24 hours a day, which I think is an incredible feature of the plan. But I'll tell them, hey, I want unlimited access to you. I want to call you 24 hours a day in the case of emergency if I'm in a car wreck or something. I also want you to write letters on my behalf. I want you to review my contracts for me before I sign something. Just look it over, make sure that it's in my best interest. I want you to prepare my will for me. Keep it updated as well. I didn't mention that earlier, but again, the law firm will not only prepare the last will or testament, but they'll update it every year at no charge. Up to once a year, they'll keep that will updated. So I'll use these, and I might throw in speeding tickets there as well, but I'll ask, a prospect to just think about that, and I'll even have them add it up on a piece of paper. How much would they charge me if they were a $300 an hour attorney to provide, those services for me? If I didn't pay them by the hour, but if I paid them a flat monthly fee, what would they charge me? And it's kind of fun to do that example because you'll hear some big numbers. People will say, $500. Most people will say between $1,000 and $5,000. Some people say, $50,000 a month. People can get creative, but the reality is they'll always say their answer is always more than what LegalShield costs. And so our transition there is, now if I could show you how to receive those kinds of services, because would you agree that those are everyday things that people deal with? And we're not talking about big lawsuits or anything, because the 4 or 5 things that I've named are everyday services. I'll say, if I could show you how to receive those for about $1 a day, would you be interested? And they inevitably say, yeah, I'd be interested. And then I take them through and actually show them the details of the coverage. But I love that example because, again, it shows people the value of what we're providing. It is an incredible value. Where else can you go and get thousands of dollars worth of anything for pennies on the dollar like this? I mean, it is such an exceptional value. And of course, I'll tell you the number one objection, I guess you could call it, the number one thing that makes people a little hesitant is not that there's not enough value, because again, I think you can agree there's incredible value. Most people, if they have an objection, they're thinking, this sounds too good to be true. There's almost too much value. So we got to be careful. We never want to oversell the coverage, but it's also important to explain to people why this type of system works. They think there's no way that I can spend about $1 a day and get, and an attorney is going to do all of those services for me. And it's just the power of large numbers. It's no different than an insurance company or AAA or anything else that operates under that principle. It's the power of large numbers, which is you get enough people paying a little bit and it adds up. And that's exactly what happens in your state. You've got a lot of people that are paying a little bit every month. LegalShield takes a portion of what they pay and they pay that directly to the law firm. And because that portion is such a big amount to the law firm, they are already financially incentivized to give excellent service. They want to keep that business. And LegalShield doesn't have to stay with them. They know that. If they're not providing the service that LegalShield requires, if they're not living up to their service agreement that they have with LegalShield, LegalShield can go get another law firm. Every law firm is aware of that. Every law firm knows that. And so they are sure to provide excellent service because they want to keep that business that they're getting from LegalShield. It has very little to do with the small amount that you and I pay. It has everything to do with the large amount that LegalShield is paying every month, guaranteed business in the eyes of that law firm. to those firms themselves. That's why the program works so well the way that it does. And again, this is a new concept to a lot of people. LegalShield recently paid for a survey to be conducted. It was a study that was completed, and one of the things that they found in this study was that 2/3 of Americans are not familiar with this concept. And you know, frankly, we didn't need a study to be able to know that. Our experience tells us that because we talk to so many people, and most people, the majority of people, have never even heard of this type of concept. But when they do hear about it, and when you and I are able to present it in a way that they understand what the coverage provides, they see value in it. And that's why so many people sign up. LegalShield is literally signing up over 10,000 people a week on this plan. And I hope that because of the time that we've spent together here, I hope you can see why. This is an incredible plan with great coverage at an incredible value.